On your mark, get set, bake!
Hello dears! Welcome back to another episode of Bake Me Up Buttercup. Today we are going to be trying something a bit different. One of my very favorite television shows is The Great British Bake Off. Recently I discovered that on their website they have an amazing assortment of recipes, including some of the technical challenges featured on the show. Now, for those not familiar, a technical challenge is a segment on the show where the contestants are tasked with creating a specific bake with minimal directions and often no knowledge of what the end result should look like. I have chosen a recipe from Mary Berry herself for a Paris-Brest. Now, beyond knowing that these are two cities in France and thus is likely a French bake, I have no idea what the final product should look or taste like. Sounds like a fun challenge to me, so let's get baking. Our first step will be to prepare a baking sheet by lining it with parchment paper. The recipe states to draw 4 circles on the underside of the paper, approximately 10 centimeters in diameter. I made this little stencil here that helped me draw out the circles for each one. I imagine these will act as a guide for piping out a dough later. Next, it looks like we need to make a choux pastry. In a saucepan, we will add 80 milliliters of water, $60 milliliters of whole milk, a pinch of salt, a pinch of sugar, and 55 grams of unsalted butter. We will heat this on a medium heat until the mixture comes to a boil and the butter has melted. By the way, have you ever wondered why the Great British Bake Off is called the Great British Baking Show in the US? This is because here in the US, the term bake-off is actually owned by Pillsbury Company, and thus the name had to be changed. How interesting! Once the mixture is bubbling and the butter has melted, we will remove it from the heat and add in 112 grams of strong flour, which is often called bread flour in the US. This type of flour has a higher protein content and provides more structure in a baked good. Stir in the flour vigorously until a dough is formed that leaves the side of the pan clean. Let's return this to the heat and continue to cook it for about 5 minutes. I've transferred my dough to a separate bowl and have allowed it to cool slightly. Our next step will be to add in the eggs, and if the mixture is too hot, it could scramble them. We will need 3 eggs that have been lightly beaten. These will be added in gradually, beating well between each addition. We are looking for a dough that is smooth and glossy with a slightly thick consistency, but thin enough that we can pipe it through a piping bag. Well, I thought that using my hand mixer would work here pretty well, but it's got it going everywhere. Usually I use my stand mixer when I make choux pastry. Now I know why. This is an interesting predicament. So I didn't feel like my dough was quite the right consistency with the 3 eggs, so I'm actually going to very slowly add another egg in.
It's good.
What happened?
It's shooting everywhere.
Is it?
Yes!
Oh, it's all over the blinds. Probably all over me. That looks to be about the right consistency right there. Alright, I have filled a piping bag with my dough and snipped a hole at the end to pipe through. We need to pipe 4 large rings onto our baking sheet, using the circles drawn earlier as a guide. The recipe states to pipe each ring in one motion. Let's see how I do. I think, looking at the amount of dough I have and the rings I have here, that I need to snip a bigger hole in this, because I feel like these are going to need to be a little bit bigger. Alright, let's try this again. That's probably more like it. I kind of missed my guide that time. Still have a lot of dough left in here. Let's see here. There's still lots of dough left, and it only said it made 4. Do I need to make the rings bigger? Is that gonna work? Only one way to find out. Well, they aren't the prettiest, but I guess we'll see. Next, we will need to use some of that leftover beaten egg to brush on the tops of each ring. While I'm at it, maybe I can smooth them down a little bit. Then we will sprinkle over some flaked almonds. Oh, or just, throw it everywhere.
These need to bake at 425 degrees Fahrenheit or 220 degrees Celsius for 10 to 15 minutes. Then we will reduce the heat to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 180 degrees Celsius, for 10 minutes. They should look well risen and golden.
Once these are baked, the recipe states we need to remove them and immediately slice them horizontally, then return them to the oven for 3 to 4 minutes to dry out. Please be careful when doing this, they are very hot. I actually was not able to film this portion because we had to do it so quickly. It does not state whether to leave the oven on, but I chose to turn it off to keep the rings from over baking. Our next step is going to be making a praline. This will involve creating a caramel. Now, caramel in its purest form is simply heating sugar until it melts down and develops a dark color and distinctive flavor. There are 2 main methods of creating caramel. A wet caramel, where you dissolve the sugar in water first, or a dry caramel, where you simply heat the sugar by itself until it liquefies, then caramelizes. A wet caramel is often considered a bit easier because it is less likely to burn. However, this recipe calls for a dry caramel, so that is what I will be attempting. I will be honest, I have never made a dry caramel before because I found it quite intimidating. So we are going to see how this goes. Let's begin by placing 200 grams of sugar into a large saucepan in a thin, even layer. Now, we just need to heat this sugar until it is melted into a caramel. Sounds quite simple, right? The trick is to make sure your sugar is heating evenly, or else it can burn. Now, I have read many varying opinions on whether stirring your caramel is okay or not. Some say to never ever stir it. Others say gentle stirring is okay. And I've even heard some people say it needs to be stirred constantly. Gosh, it's all so confusing. When making a wet caramel, stirring can sometimes cause your caramel to recrystallize. However, this is much less likely to happen when making a dry caramel. For mine, I am very gently stirring using a rubber spatula to ensure that the sugar is melting evenly. Once everything is melted, the pan is carefully swirled to keep spots from burning until it reaches a lovely caramel color. Once the desired color is reached, we will remove it from the heat to stop the cooking process. Now, the recipe states to add 100 grams of hazelnuts. Unfortunately, I could not find hazelnuts when I went to the store, so I am using macadamia nuts instead. Though the flavor won't be quite the same, hopefully this substitution works out okay. Once those are added in, we will carefully pour this onto a silicone baking mat and allow it to cool and harden. When the praline has cooled completely, we are going to break it up and place it in a food processor. According to the recipe, this needs to be blitzed into a fine dust. Let's go. not? Well, it's not exactly dusty so much as a little pasty here. I think the Florida humidity is getting to it a little bit. I think it's about as good as we're gonna get. That just leaves us with our final element, the filling for our pastry. In a large mixing bowl, we will add 600 milliliters of heavy cream. To the cream, we will add the seeds of a vanilla bean pod. It actually landed in there. Some of it just catapulted there. Now we just need to whip this up until it reaches soft peaks. Now the original recipe actually calls for double cream as opposed to heavy cream, but that is unfortunately not available in the US. Double cream has a slightly higher milk fat percentage than heavy cream, which leads to a richer end product. Alas, we will have to make do with what we have. This will be added to a piping bag fitted with a star tip nozzle. Alright, now we can assemble everything together. First, we will sprinkle about half of the praline onto the bottom of each ring. Oh, and if you're wondering where the fourth ring went, don't worry, it's fine. We just couldn't fit them all on this rack. Then the recipe states to pipe a generous amount of cream onto each ring over the praline. Alright, let's be generous. Looks pretty generous to me. The remaining praline will be sprinkled over that. This doesn't sprinkle very well. I have to say though, they do look delicious. Now the lids can be placed back on top. It's very hard to see where I'm going.
Your eyes are so big.
My eyes may be big, but my eyesight is poor. And finally, a dusting of powdered sugar. Oh, powdered sugar always makes everything look so lovely. Oh, well, they certainly do look lovely, don't they? But now it's time for the judging. My official taste tester is standing by, and while neither of us know how it should actually taste, I have tasked him with looking up what a Paris-Brest should look like. So, tell me, dear, does it look the part?
So, it looks mostly right. You have much less almonds than the ones that I've seen on, and your piping style for the whipped cream is not exactly what I saw on some of the ones, specifically the photos of the one that this recipe is based on, which was more, you do like a dollop, and you have kind of like bespoke orbs going around it essentially with that like fluted
instead of like a
piping.
ring.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, the important part though. Let's see how it tastes. There you go.
Thank you.
It's dinner time for us, so we are quite hungry. It's very interesting. The textures of the crunchy praline and the very smooth whipped cream with that choux pastry, it's different.
Yeah, this has a lot of things going on texture-wise. You have that like chewy choux pastry, the creamy whipped cream, and then the crunchy praline and the almonds on the top. Overall, it has like a very nice, like nutty kind of taste to it. Definitely not overly sweet. At all. Like almost all the sweetness is coming out of the praline.
Yes, it's very interesting, but I do like how just very lightly sweetened it is. Without the sweetness in the whipped cream, and the pastry has very little sugar in it as well. So really, all of that sugar is coming from the praline, but it's kind of refreshing.
No, I like it. It's very nice. Not very heavy. Like most French patisserie, I'd probably rather just go get it in a shop than go through all the effort of making it, but
it was a lot of work, I will be honest. Quite a number of steps going on here. So, I mean, if you're certainly looking for a challenge or something fun to do, then it might be worth a try. Because really, it's quite a tasty dessert. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Let me know if you would like to see more challenges like this one in the future episodes. Much love to all of you. Until next time. Mwah!
All right. One for the books. We got it in the books.
We did it.
We got it in.
We did it. It took us 6 hours.